Hello, welcome to a very special edition of This World. It's coming to you from one of the most magical sites that I think I have ever been at, in one of the most magical cities in the world. Also, one of the most contested cities that the world has ever seen. This is, of course, Jerusalem. That's the Dome of the Rock there. There's Al-Aqsa Mosque out there. That's the Western Wall, sometimes also called the Wailing Wall there. So the holiest site for one of the holiest sites for Muslims, one of the holiest site for the Jews. And just there is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus Christ was crucified and then buried. So this is Jerusalem, and this is the heart of Israel. And today on This World, I'm going to talk to you about Israel, because one of the things that we're going to try and do on This World is take you to some of the most important countries in the world, to tell you a little bit about them, to help you get a sense of global history and global dynamics and global politics and what's happening in this world, and try and tell it to you with a little bit of Indian perspective. So what are we going to have on the program today? We're going to be looking at some of the recent events that have been happening in Israel, notably all these protests you've been hearing about over judicial reforms. The Israeli government is trying to fix or trying to reform the judiciary, and it's trying to put the judiciary under the control of the executive. A lot of people don't like it, and we've seen some of the biggest protests ever in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in other cities. People have been on the road saying this is the end of democracy. So we're going to talk about that. And of course, this is Israel, so that's the other problem that never completely seems to go away, which is, of course, the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what's happening with Arab countries, and is conflict destined to continue in Israel forever? By the way, what about terrorism? What about revenge actions? As we've been seeing that. You open the newspapers today, there have been terror attacks just in the last week, and vigilante reprisal attacks taking place from settlers in many places, and that has led to its own issues. So that seems to be a story that never goes away. And we're going to take a look at that as well. We're going to walk through the city of Jerusalem with the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, and we're going to be talking to her both about the Israeli-Palestinian and the Israeli-Arab conflict, but also get us a little bit of a history of this most historic of cities while we are doing this. And hey, before we go, just in case you thought that wasn't enough for 1 hour, we're also going to be talking about the Israeli high-tech miracle, because at the end of the day, this tiny little country of 9 million people, situated in an area that is less than the Indian state of Meghalaya, has come up with some of the most dynamic high-tech companies on this planet. How has that happened? How has Israel become the startup nation? And how could Israel perhaps become the scale-up nation? That's the final thing we're going to be turning our attention to. So it's a busy agenda here on This World, and I'm going to start off by taking you through the major story. My colleague Jody Cohen has been tracking the protests in great length and figuring out what actually underlines it. So before I come to Jerusalem and all the other issues, let's listen in to Jody's report on what's actually happening with the protests and why they're taking place.
2 months ago, the coalition announced details of its judicial reform plans. Their view is that back in the 1990s, the judiciary increased its powers and effectively superseded the powers of the parliament and executive by being able to strike down laws and ministerial appointments. The government says that the proposed changes will restore democracy and accuse opposition leaders of inciting the public and of not accepting the result of the last election. But the opposition is vehemently against the changes, arguing that they will trample democracy. Protests have been going on weekly, starting in Tel Aviv and soon spreading to Jerusalem and across the country. The protest organisers announced demonstrations and marches across the country on Thursday to coincide with debates on judicial reform in parliaments this week. They even produced an interactive map to show people where they can go to make their voices heard and at what time. But not everyone is against the reforms. I've been travelling around the country this week speaking to people in a variety of communities to really get a feel for the differing views about the proposals. I went to the ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak, where the residents tend to support the religious parties in the coalition.
We are free, we want to be free. If somebody wants to go to synagogue, okay. But not rule to make rule for everything. It's very, very, very bad.
That woman that was shot up in her car. I don't think the judges have the military expertise to make these decisions either. They should be limited on civil rights.
I spoke with Shai Rosenzweig, mayor of the right-wing settlement of Alfei Menashe, whose residents are more likely to support the nationalist parties in the government.
People that protest, they're using it they're making a cynical use of the situation, and just it's a lot of politics, and be pragmatic, talk, and Israel will stay the only democratic country in the area, I can guarantee.
I spoke with young and older people from the mixed community of Kfar Saba, whose views were definitely mixed.
It's very angry to see so many Jewish people against us, against our needs, and we need to protect ourselves. And right now it's not happening.
Everything which the current government is doing, while Bibi leads it, is terrible, is awful. It's a breach and violation of the law.
It's a really broad set of law proposals which will eventually lead to the disembodiment of the judicial system.
And on Thursday, I spoke with protesters in the left-wing, liberal and financial capital of Israel, Tel Aviv.
Not compromise on democracy. We can compromise on many things, but not democracy.
Certainly mixed views when it comes to the judicial reform proposals. Polls suggest the majority of people are either against the changes or against the pace of change. From the people I've spoken to, the views range from being strongly for judicial reform to being for a compromise position somewhere in the middle to being passionately opposed to any sort of change whatsoever. What do they have in common? An understanding that this is an important event shaping the future of Israel in the coming years, and strong feelings on all sides. It remains to be seen what happens next. This is Jodie Cohen for This World. World is One.
So that's the most recent history of Israel, the fighting or the protests that are taking place over the judicial reforms. But that's only part of it. Remember, the bigger stories that I'm going to be talking to you about in a short while still continue. Terrorism, what's happening with the settlements, what's happening with the Palestinians, what's happening with the Oslo Accords and the Abraham Accords, and is there going to be peace in Israel? That seems to be there. But let's face it, this is not new. This is the Holy Land, but it has also historically been a place of conflict. And that's because of the sacred nature of this. In fact, let me just show this to you. If you look down at the Western Wall, which is right down here, this is the holiest spot for Jews. And this is actually, this is where the Solomon's first temple was, 3,300 years ago. And then after that was destroyed, then it was rebuilt. The second temple came, and just a little bit around that period, the retaining wall was built, and that is the Western Wall. And as I said, this is the holiest spot for Jews to pray, as you can see them doing right now. But just behind that, you've got the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Muslims believe that this is where Prophet Muhammad ascended to the heavens from, and as a result, this is one of the most sacred spots in Islam. I think after Mecca and Medina, this would be the most sacred site for Islam. And if you go a little bit this side, if you think that fighting between the Jews and the Muslims isn't enough, remember the Crusades, remember the Christians coming to fight for the Holy Land, and that's because all of this was also very sacred for them. So the Crusaders came, the Templars came, and somewhere out here, of course, is the Christian quarter, and that's where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. This is where Jesus Christ was crucified. This is where Christians believe the body of Jesus Christ is buried there at the Church of Holy Sepulchre. So this is a very, very historic place, and because of the history and because of the fighting, it is really a place you should get to know a little bit about. And Can you just bear with me for a few minutes, because the most recent fighting is not all of this. This has been happening for thousands of years. The most recent fighting, obviously, the last 70 years has been Israel and the right of the state of Israel to exist, and Israel being set up out here, and what happened with the Arabs and the Arab state fighting with Israel, and what should be done with the Palestinian people. That's been the real subject of argument and fighting for the last 75 years or so. So let me go a little bit into giving you the quick history of that. I'm going to be walking with the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem through the streets of this entire holy city, and I'm going to be discussing some of those issues with her, including whether peace can be brought and which way could peace possibly be realized. But before I do any of that, let's just give you a potted history of what's been happening here for the last 75 years or so.
Recent history begins somewhere around the First World War. After the war ended, the British established a colony in Palestine under the League of Nations mandate. The British were allowed to rule the area until Palestine was ready for self-governance. Back in the 19th century, this region's population was around 87% Muslim, 10% Christian, and 3% Jewish. But in the years following the war, the Jewish population in Palestine began increasing, courtesy what was happening in Europe, the expelling of Jews, and the prosecution. In Palestine, the influx meant increasing tension between the Israeli and the Arab population. During the Second World War, more Jews began making their way to Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations held a vote. It divided Palestine and established separate Palestinian and Jewish states. While the Jewish leaders accepted the plan, the Arabs did not. Either way, the British left in 1948. The Jews declared independence, and Israel was created. Thus began a never-ending spate of violence. In 1948, 5 Arab states invaded Israel: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. Israel won the war. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled to Arab countries. In 1956, tensions escalated once again. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Israel attacked the Sinai Peninsula and retook the canal. The British and the French government supported Israel, but peace was nowhere in sight. In 1967, the Six-Day War broke out. Israel fought Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Over 90% of the Egyptian Air Force was destroyed. Israel captured the Gaza Strip from Egypt, Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan. The last one was especially significant, because the control of East Jerusalem meant Jews could now pray at the Western Wall. In 1973, Syria and Egypt launched airstrikes in Israel. The assault began on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, lending to its name the Yom Kippur War. Who won? Israel. All this while, Israel was encouraging Jewish settlements in areas that weren't given to it under the UN resolution. In 1987, there was an uprising of Palestinians. They were angry about the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. These protests triggered the First Intifada. It came to an end in 1993 with the Oslo Peace Accords. Who were the signatories? The government of Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was formed in 1964 to fight for the liberation of Palestine. The PLO was operating from Lebanon. In 1982, the Israeli Defense Force invaded southern Lebanon to evict the PLO. Cut to the Oslo Accords. It established limited Palestinian self-rule in parts of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. In 2006, the Second Lebanon War broke out. Israel was fighting a Lebanese Shia group called Hezbollah. Also in 2006, a Sunni Islamist group, Hamas, won elections in Palestine. In the years that followed, the group fought multiple battles with Israel. In 2020, the Trump administration announced its most ambitious foreign policy project, the Abraham Accords. a plan for normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab states. In September 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain agreed to normalize ties with Israel. They were the third and fourth countries in the region to do so, following Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. But the truth is, the multiple peace accords have not really been able to solve the conflict. Tensions are still very much on the rise between Israelis and Palestinians. There's talk of a third intifada on the horizon. And what happens next is anybody's guess.
And I'm going to dive into all of those issues in some detail now. It's not every day that you get the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem to actually take you through a guided tour of the Holy City and also discuss politics and what's causing the problems and where the solutions come from. But that's exactly what we did a few minutes ago with Flora Hassan, and let me just play that for you. This is what she told me about Jerusalem and about Israel. Well, let's now really try to understand Israel in great detail, also weaving history into it. And we have with us Flora Hassan. I was talking to you, you're the Deputy Mayor, of course, of Jerusalem, and it's a absolutely beautiful city, I have to tell you.
Thank you so much.
Now, you were talking to me, I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am.
So welcome to the city.
Here I am. So now tell me all about it.
There's a lot to talk about. So welcome to the city of Jerusalem, our capital city. And it's a city that was created by King David 3,000 years ago. So it's a 3,000-year-old city, which has been conquered and reconquered, and the Jewish people have been in and out and thrown out and come back for 3,000 years. But the main reason why King David decided to create the capital of the Jewish kingdoms here in Jerusalem was because the land of Israel was divided into different tribes. The Jewish people used to be tribal people. Yeah. And then you have a very strong king, very smart politician, and he decides to unite the Jewish kingdoms. And he is the king of Judea. And the capital of Judea is Hebron, which is not here. But he understood that to unite the kingdoms, he needed to break neutral ground. And that was Jerusalem.
I'm so glad you were talking about the entire subject of uniting the tribes and uniting people, because
yes.
While we are looking at the history of Jerusalem, and it's great to be here, and who better than you to show me around, but let's talk a little bit about current politics as well.
Sure.
Israel is looking perhaps less united right now than it has in a very, very long period of time. Not just the Israeli-Palestinian issues that are continuing. Terror attacks are taking place. Another one took place yesterday. You're having vigilante attacks in revenge. And then, of course, you've got all the protests over judicial reforms. So is Israel is seeming a very divided place right now? Is that an unfair way to put it?
Well, that's kind of a negative way to look at it. Okay. And I share in your concerns about what's going on at the moment. But let me just say, I mean, you know this, India is the largest democracy in the world. In big democracies, people disagree, right? Yeah. And so at the moment, what we're seeing is not division. What we're seeing is a living, breathing, arguing democracy, arguing about something very fundamental. What are the different arms of government? What is their role? How do you provide the right checks and balances? And so there are people who agree with the reforms, there are people who disagree with the reforms, but the protests are in large, peaceful protests, people who are having a real democratic argument, and that's something to celebrate.
Yeah, you're talking about the judicial reforms in particular.
The judicial reforms.
All the issues that are taking place with it.
Yes.
You said democracy, you said a living democracy. A lot of the people who are protesting on the streets, and I've just come from Tel Aviv where the protests are taking place.
Yes.
They're saying this is the opposite of democracy. This is an effort for the executive to take full control and take full charge. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Not in my opinion, because what you're looking at...
That's not what's happening. The executive is pretty much saying we should control the judiciary.
No, the executive is saying the judiciary should have at least one check. The judiciary in this country is completely unchecked. There is not one check. In regular countries, in regular democracies, the judiciary has one check, which is the government selects judges, and then the judiciary... And then the judiciary is independent.
In India, we've got an NJAC which selects judges, and it's been a controversial issue.
And what is the NJAC comprised of?
Judges.
So judges select other judges.
Essentially.
So
I know the executive is complaining about it in India as well. So
yeah.
It's not that.
So I think that's problematic, because what happens is that it ends up being a revolving door of the same people. And when you look at the judiciary right now in Israel, you look at the Supreme Court, you don't see a lot of minorities. You don't see ethnic diversity. And I think that's a problem. Now, I'm a lawyer. I believe that we need a strong, independent judiciary, but we need a judiciary where its role is defined. And in India, your judiciary, your Supreme Court does judicial review. Here, they get involved in administrative, governmental decisions. Why? Because they gave themselves that power. No law was passed defining the scope of their power. They defined the scope of their own power. And what this government is trying to do is restore the balance. It's not trying to get more power. It's trying to bring the judiciary to have the power that any normal judiciary in any democracy should have.
All right. I am going to go on to the rest of it as well. But just looking at the judicial reforms, I'm sure you've seen the polls. The public doesn't seem to like the judicial reforms. I mean, Likud, I know Likud has done it. You've got allies who are on the right side of politics. But if you're looking at the opinion polls, people are saying, we're not sure we like this.
Well, I think...
I'm sure you've seen the one opinion poll
of course.
If elections were held tomorrow, would lose.
So I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I think that unfortunately and cynically, the politicians who lost this last election are politicizing these reforms, because many of them were in favor of reforms until this happened and until they lost. I mean, it's, documented. The second thing I was going to say is that I like a very interesting quote of Shimon Peres, who used to be our president, and he said, polls are like perfume, smell but don't swallow. We have to be careful with polls.
There will be lots of elections in Israel, though, so you need to keep the polls somewhat in mind, right?
Absolutely, but we just got into government 2 months ago. Why are we polling right now? We're not going to go into another election, hopefully for 4 years.
The word hopefully was used.
Of course, we're a coalition.
Hopefully is a word, right? It's coalition government.
It's always a word in this country, for everything.
All right, we've discussed the judicial reforms. I want to now shift my focus, and perhaps we can go into the old city.
Absolutely.
I'd like to discuss the other questions.
Yes, security.
The fundamental questions that are still around the Palestinian issue and where security stands and what's happening with all of these attacks. But maybe I want to get you to show me around inside. And then
let's do it. So this is Jaffa Gate. Look, it's an L-shaped gate. So
first of all, I have to say, so this is a Jaffa Gate, right?
Jaffa Gate, 16th century Ottoman gate. And the reason it's L-shaped was to another kind of defense to the old city. Okay. And this gap is also part of Jaffa Gate. Today, it's one of the main tourist entrances to the old city.
Well, I have to say, I have to say thank you so much for doing this. Not everybody, I'm sure, who gets a deputy mayor of Jerusalem to actually give you a walking tour through the old city.
Well, first of all, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. But I want to come back to what I was saying to you when I was talking to you in an interview. I did look at what about safety and what about security. And I have to say,
do you feel unsafe?
No, but I'm also feeling, I'm certainly not feeling unsafe, but I'm almost surprised that you as the deputy mayor are walking around here. There's no security guard anywhere to be seen.
No.
I haven't actually going in and out of the hotels had any metal detectors.
No.
No one's really checked me.
Well,
why is that so? Because Israel had a reputation for really, really, really tight security. And I have to say it's probably a lot less than Delhi right now.
Really?
Delhi hasn't had a terror attack in.
So I would say that the security here is, you don't see it, but it's around. Basically, the whole city is a network of cameras. Oh. So there is some place in City Hall where everybody's seeing what we're doing right now. They're not paying much attention because we're not doing anything suspicious. But there are eyes everywhere. We are one of the most...
So you're saying it's not in your... that's where the Israeli technology really comes in, right?
Exactly. But you will see soldiers and policemen further down in the market to ensure that everything is peaceful.
So there's no visible security at this present moment. I'm just trying to understand this again because I think that's an interesting lesson for us to
Yes, there's no visible security, but there are cameras everywhere.
And that means in many ways it's actually strange because having cameras everywhere should feel very intrusive. But
Not
in
at
many
all.
ways it's less than having security forces everywhere.
Absolutely, but you have some security guys over there, police.
Okay.
And so there is presence for people to feel safe and to be safe. But normally these vendors just want people to buy. This is a tourism destination. This is the most visited tourist site in Israel.
Okay.
And the vendors want people to buy.
Okay.
By the way, I want to say one thing, which is very, very nice. When there were no tourists, we took advantage and we put in place an accessibility plan. We are the most accessible ancient, we're the most accessible ancient city in the world. All of this means that a person in a wheelchair can come and visit the old city, can go and visit the church, can go and visit the mosque.
Excuse me, come see my shop, what you have.
How are you?
It's a lovely place to come and shop.
It is, we'll shop. So this is accessibility, that's what it is.
All right, so let's move now from security to the politics of this, right? Of what exactly is happening. It's, for anybody looking at it from the outside, it seems that the positions that have been taken are continuing to be intractable. There's no easy solution in mind. Israel had a lot of sympathy from the entire world as to what was done originally, like the way Israelis fought in the 1948 war, in 1967, beat all those neighbors, set up a fantastic, successful, technologically heavy country in the middle of the desert. All of that is the stuff of legend right now. But that David and Goliath story has been somewhat turned on its head in recent times.
Yes.
You're hearing about boycott movements and BDS and what have you, and Israel being very clearly positioned as the international bad guy in all of this.
Yeah.
How would you react to all of that?
I think it's extremely unfair. And I think that what people don't seem to understand is that the conflict in this country is not about the fact that there's no Palestinian state. The conflict in this country is about the fact that there's a Jewish state. Ideologically, the Palestinian leadership has never accepted our existence. How do I know that? They've been offered 4 times everything they said they wanted and still rejected those peace deals. And what did they return with? Violence and terrorism. So if you want a state, why don't you have a state already? They've had plenty of opportunities. And that's why the real reason that we're still in this situation is because the Palestinian leadership is lying to their people, telling them one day we're going to kick them all out. One day the whole thing is going to be back. They do not talk to them about a peaceful resolution.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the...
By the historical crossroads in here.
So if I just look at that, and let's just talk that through for a moment, what that one sign means. Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is that way. That's where Christ was crucified. Western Wall, one of the most sacred spots for the Jews for thousands of years. And Temple Mount, Al-Haram Sharif, where the Prophet Muhammad ascended.
But what this poster is telling you something else, and that is that we sanctify freedom of worship in the city, mainly because it's under Israeli sovereignty. Before Israel took sovereignty, there was no way that you and I could have gone to the church or even the Western Wall.
Okay, so it's an interesting point that you're making, and I'm just going to digress a bit. We'll come back to the politics of it. But all of these religions out here in this one place, probably the only place on the planet which is like this, right?
Yes, but the only guarantee that everybody can go and worship according to their tradition is Israeli sovereignty, because before 1967, when this was an illegal Jordanian occupation from 48 to 67, Jews couldn't pray at the Western Wall, Christians couldn't pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was absolutely not allowed. And so we today actively facilitate freedom of worship.
All right, you are still going to, let me come back to trying to find a solution to this. I'm just trying to not finish.
The solution is very
simple. I don't want to find a solution in the
I'll tell you what the solution is.
So this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yes. This is where Jesus is believed to be buried. In Hebrew, we call it the Church of the Tomb.
Yeah.
And there are people who believe that it was here or very nearby where Jesus was actually crucified. Other people believe that he was crucified a little bit further out, but was buried here.
I believe there's an old, I believe there's the old sort of a stone. You go behind that and you can see the mountain of Calvary as well.
That's what you can do inside. And the different Christian denominations also have taken different parts of the church, which is interesting.
So, as you were just saying, we're about to go to the most holy spot for Muslims and for the Jews. It's one of the most holy spots for Christians.
This is it. This is it. Exactly. And as you can see, everybody can come and worship freely. And we actively facilitate that and ensure that all our tourists feel at home in the city.
I'm finding it really interesting. So now suddenly all signs, all shops, it's Christian now.
Yes.
It's as if you've suddenly gone from, I don't know, Saudi Arabia to
Rome.
Rome, yeah.
Well, here is Rome. So the beauty of Jerusalem is that it's got layers of history. So it's got Jewish history, Roman history, Babylonian history, just got Balmuk history, then back to Jewish, Ottoman, layers and layers and layers. And here we have one of the oldest layers, which is Roman paving stone, which is incredible.
So it actually dates back to Roman times.
Yes.
Okay.
This is paving. You have to be careful. Paving from Roman times.
So I still have to say, we're getting closer and closer to the Temple Mount, and we're getting closer and closer to the Western Wall. I'm still somewhat bemused at the lack of visible security. I know you said there are cameras. How do you do it? You try and go to the source of it? I mean, because it's not in your face.
Well,
I'm not seeing any checking or...
Ironically, the only metal detector we will pass is to go to the Western Wall. In other words, there is not a problem security-wise to go to a Christian site, even Temple Mount, but to go to the Jewish site in the Jewish capital, we have to have people go through metal detectors.
But how do you... So when you were saying you're detecting it at the source, what does that mean? Your intelligence is now good enough that you can... You will go and find the terrorists in a Nablus or wherever it is, or Germany, before they even come here. So you don't have to check
we've had 14 deaths in the last 3 weeks, so it doesn't always work. But our intelligence is good enough that we prevent 99% of the bad guys.
So we are now right at the heart of Jerusalem, right? I can see that's the way to the Temple Mount and Al-Haram Sharif, and this is the Western Wall. It's
absolutely.
Right, so we are right at the center of this. I'm just going to take you a little bit back in history. All of this fighting, all of this has really come for the possession of this like square kilometer around us right now. And it's not fresh, it's not after Israel. People have been fighting about this particular piece of land now for thousands of years.
Absolutely. But look what we have today. We have a thriving tourism destination with 4 quarters. The Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Armenian quarter. When this was under Jordanian sovereignty, Jews could not go and pray at their holiest site. In fact, Jewish holiest site is Temple Mount. And as you were just told right now, only Muslims can go through this entrance. So we are maintaining the status quo. We're ensuring that the status quo pertains in this city. And so when people accuse us of somehow breaching that or disrespecting Haram al-Sharif, you've seen for yourself, Israeli soldiers protecting Haram al-Sharif.
All right, now, I get what you're saying out there, but if you look at the conditions, for example, you can say that whatever's happening in the Gaza Strip is not Israeli responsibility.
We left in 2005.
And I completely agree with you. You left it in 2005, Hamas took it over, and whatever's happening inside there has got nothing to do with Israel. But in the West Bank, or what you would call Judea and Samaria, the issues that are pertaining inside that are very much Israeli responsibility to some extent?
Not really. 20 years ago, we signed the Oslo Accords with the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority was created and they have autonomy for Area A and mostly for Area B. Area A is where all their major cities are, and Area B is where all their major towns and villages are. They have sole responsibility for their own autonomy. We only go in there when there's a security threat to our country. When they don't do their job, we have to do that job to protect ourselves. But they have autonomy. They run their own government, healthcare. Now, if they're doing a bad job, is that also Israel's fault?
No, but if you're trying to find a solution going forward, as positions become more and more intractable, right now you're still dealing with the Palestinian Authority.
Yes.
You're still dealing with, Mohammed Abbas. Tomorrow, something happens to him. You have Hamas taking over in the northern parts of the Western Bank. Then what happens? Islamic Jihad takes over. Then what happens? Then you've got a Gaza Strip type situation right next to... And remember, this is right next to Israel.
So how is that convincing me that we need to give away land in order to have peace?
No.
You are actually got to the crux of the problem.
I'm not convincing you one way or the other. I'm just trying to understand what the situation is.
Yes.
Because some would say a solution, therefore, has to be... you have to try and find a solution.
Absolutely.
And
we've been trying to find a solution before the state was even born. We offered the Palestinians a two-state solution before 1948. In 1948, they said no. They started a war against us. All the Arab countries around Israel started a war against us to annihilate us. If they would have won, there would have been the second Jewish genocide in 10 years. They lost, thank God, it was a miracle. 1967, all the armies gathered up again to destroy us. This time they didn't destroy us, and this time we took land, historic Jewish land, back to protect ourselves. Right. And that is the situation that we have right now. And then in early 2000s, after 4 wars, we gave that land to their autonomy to prepare themselves for statehood. What did they do with that power? What have they done to build a better future for their people?
You're aware of BDS and this entire movement that is in a way saying sanction Israel.
But BDS is very clear about their motives. Their motives is not a peaceful resolution with Israel. The BDS's motives is the destruction of Israel. They say it very clearly. We should believe them when they say it.
But if you're trying to see the situation right now, I'm also just trying to figure out which way this goes. Because how many people, for all the security measures that we were discussing inside there and all the intelligence that you have, how many people have died in terror attacks in the last 2 weeks?
In the last 2 weeks, 14 tragic deaths. And we prevent 97, 98% of everybody who set out to kill people.
And you also shoot down 97% of the rockets now that are being fired into Israel.
Absolutely.
But there are 200,000 rockets in Hezbollah-controlled land in southern Lebanon aimed at Israel. So that's what I'm trying to get my head around. Here you've got a really successful, high-tech, thriving, hub. But there are still these existential questions, and I'm not sure that...
I think we're the only country still facing these existential questions, which is ridiculous. You ask me what the solution is, Vikram, I'm going to tell you what the solution is. A Palestinian Mahatma Gandhi who puts down arms and says, we're both going to live here.
Okay, a Palestinian Mahatma Gandhi is one possibility. How about an Israeli Mahatma Gandhi?
Oh, we've had a few. We've had a few. And then on the other side, you had Yasser Arafat, who responded to a peace deal
but what seems to be
with a war.
But what seems to be happening, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that even the Israeli side seems to be getting a little more entrenched hardline. Is that a fair way to put it, or no?
It's not that we're an entrenched hardline. It's that we're exhausted from trying to make peace. The people who openly say in their own language that they don't believe in a peaceful resolution, they believe that one day they'll be able to kick us all out. This is what's in the Palestinian school book. This is what's in the media. They're not talking. My kids come home and they're singing songs, one day we will be born to peace. You know what songs they're singing? One day we're going to kick all the Jews out.
So this is it. This is the Western Wall.
This is the Western Wall. What is the Western Wall? It's basically one of the outer walls of King Solomon's temple that was destroyed and rebuilt and then destroyed again. So the Jewish holiest site is actually not the wall. It's the Al-Aqsa compound. It's the Temple Mount. That is our most holiest site. And yet, we give up praying there in order to keep the peace and the status quo. And on top of that, we get accused for breaching that status quo when all we're doing is preserving it.
So right now, this is the place where the holiest place where Jews can go and pray, right?
Where we can go and pray, this is it.
All right. Let me just look at the future. No better place to do this. I mean, the Western Wall has been a symbol of hope, and has been, you know, when Jews for all of your history,
They call it the Wailing Wall because we used to cry by that wall.
Yeah.
And
but now if you look at the future, where are the signs of hope? When you're coming and praying here and saying what's going to happen, what are the signs of hope? Because you're saying peace is not going to be easy to find. Terrorism may exist for a long period of time. Where's the hope? Where's the peace coming from?
What I'm saying is that this is a conflict that could be resolved in a day with one simple switch, that the Palestinian leadership accepts that there is a Jewish state here. The minute they do, there'll be peace. That's it. Ideologically, they still haven't accepted that we're not going away. We're not going anywhere. So that's really the key to peace. We don't have that yet.
Would
so we
Israel
manage.
Make the compromises that would be necessary for that, giving up some land.
4 times. 4 times we've offered it. 4 times. And 4 times we've been met with terrorism and war. After us offering them the leadership, what they said they wanted.
So now, while violence is continuing and terrorists are continuing, and there's no clear peace in sight, and rockets are still being fired, and every day when I open the newspapers here in Israel, I'm seeing stories of attacks. On the other side, one thing which is happening is, and I know you've been very closely involved with that, the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
Opening up to
Yes.
UAE, opening up to Bahrain.
Yes.
Who knows, potentially opening up to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Are these really important developments?
It's game-changing. The Middle East has been realigned between the countries that want peace and prosperity and the countries that want radicalism and destruction. There is no longer an Arab-Israeli conflict. There are conflicts in the Middle East, but it's a realignment, and that's what's hopeful. So we've made peace with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, Sudan, Chad, the Muslim part of Africa. And by the way, India is very important in this whole mosaic.
I was just about to ask you, what role is India playing in this? Because I too, you too, has obviously been something that India has been involved with and helping with. And I know there's a very close relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi. What's the role that India is playing?
I think for economic development, it's a crucial role. We can triangulate the relationship between Israel, India, and the Gulf. For mutual prosperity, I think that has a lot of promise. I think there are more countries that eventually will join the Abraham Accords. And again, these countries have to understand, which side are you on? The one of peace and prosperity or the one of conflict and destruction? And at some point, the Palestinians will choose to be on the side of peace and prosperity.
Well, you know, it's really fascinating to hear you saying all of this. And by the way, I'm not sure, having got the deputy mayor of Jerusalem to give us both the history of Israel, the history of conflict, the path in the future, and also a fantastic tour through all of Jerusalem. I think it's also time to let all of you know that we're actually married to an Indian. So yeah,
I am. We have a very strong connection to India ourselves. My husband's family are from Calcutta. They are actually an Iraqi Jewish family that 150, 200 years ago moved to Calcutta. And they established a very well-known bakery there in the New Market called Nahum's. We were just there for Christmas.
Okay.
And we're very close to India. We make Indian food at home. I have Indian furniture. I have saris and salwar shamizas. We're very connected culturally. And so I believe very much in the connection between India, the Gulf, Israel, and everybody else who wants to join.
So as the deputy mayor of Jerusalem,
Thank you,
thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Beautiful city, and it's been such a pleasure. And I'm going to sit here and soak up history for a while.
Enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. So let's hope that peace will be found. Someday there will be peace, and there'll be durable peace, and it'll be, of course, great if India can play a role in that. But let me now step aside to all of this history and look a little bit at the future. Because Israel is not only something about the history and about the conflict, it's also about something really dramatic that is happening out here. And that's a high-tech revolution, the likes of which very few countries have actually seen. And it's really interesting that it's happening here in Israel, because it's a country of 9 million people. Now, what's leading to it? You could argue it's because it's a country of 9 million people, lots of immigrants coming in, surrounded by enemies. So you need army, you need conscription. every young person in Israel goes to the army. They sometimes end up in elite units like the 8200 unit, where they're trained in cyber security and they're trained in computer arts, and then they leave the army and they take that to the private sector. Whatever the reasons are, a culture of chutzpah, a culture of pushing back, but all of that has led to a startup revolution here in Israel. And it was a great pleasure of mine to meet in Tel Aviv this morning one of the people who's been looking at that really, really closely, and also somebody who's been writing and talking at great length about how startup nation can become scale-up nation. Here's my conversation with Helene. Interestingly, there's one thing that's really defined Israel over the past few years. It's not just been about the conflict or the conflicts that are continuing right now. It's also been this. This is the startup hub of the world. Israel is where a lot of the high tech is done. And this, by the way, is the headquarters. This is the Biga Cafe in Sarona. You have Stanford University at the heart of Silicon Valley in the United States. Here, it's cafes like this. It's a place like this where all the people come together and they gather and they talk and they incubate some of the most fantastic technology that the world has seen. And here's one of the people who is actually helping to scale up startup nation to scale up nation. I think that's the way Forbes described it.
It is indeed.
It's such a pleasure talking to you.
The honor is mine. I've heard unbelievable things. I've followed you. I've seen your work. It's an honor.
You're being too kind. Hey, tell me about this place, though. I mean, let's just sort of look at it.
Yeah,
I heard you were telling me on the phone that this is the Stanford University of Israel.
Yeah,
Tell me what's so special about this place.
This is Biga Cafe. We're in Sarona Marketplace. The Sarona, I don't even know what to call this place. I mean, you'll see it when we walk around. It's an unbelievably beautiful place. And literally every tech company is right here. So this is just amazing location. So I sit here every day. And if you come here on a regular day, you basically see half the ecosystem just like flowing through here, from VCs to CEOs to journalists. They're all here. It's just an amazing place to sit. I mean, I love it. And it's just a very, very convenient place.
Okay, so let's now talk about, and I'm going to pick your brains on this, right? What makes Israel one of the centers of the tech world? And it's an interesting question because it's a tiny little country. You've got 9 million people. I'm sorry, coming from India, there are 1.4 billion people. Right. And Israel, 9 million people in a landmass which is smaller than Meghalaya, I think is the way I've often heard it described. And look at the technology that Israel has come up with. The camera, Face ID, Israeli, right? Mobileye, Israeli. USB, Israeli. What does it?
Listen, I mean, there's obviously a lot of literature on this. The book Startup Nation answered that question, and there's not one right answer. There's many, many factors here. The military definitely plays a very significant role. 8200 and the intelligence units are the most innovative military units, I think, in the world. And by the way, right behind us is the HQ, the headquarters of the IDF, where it all goes down, right there.
I'm just going to pause you as you go along, because each of the factors he's going to talk about, I'm going to just analyze it. You said 8200 unit.
Yeah.
I was talking about Stanford and other places in Silicon Valley. 8200 is an Israeli army elite unit. Now, kids get picked up from that. They start identifying kids at the age of 15 and 16.
Yeah.
And then they enter this unit. And all the really good people or the brightest technology people all come from an army unit. So that's the incubator of Israeli tech.
That's a really good way to put it. I mean, I can tell you it's extremely rare that I see a leading entrepreneur when we start the meeting that it doesn't start with, I came from 8200. It's everyone came from 8200. It's wild. But, that's just one component. There's definitely a cultural component, right? I think that, I'll generalize, but then again, life is about generalizations, and say that if you say to most entrepreneurs in the world that what they want to build is impossible, they're like, okay, I'll move on to the next thing. You tell an Israeli that what they want to do is impossible, you know what they say? Hold my beer. Let me do it, right? And then they go and they build it. So there's a cultural thing for sure. There's definitely...
There's a historical element to that, because at the end of the day, what's happened in this country for the last, 70 years?
75, yeah.
It was a desert. Where these buildings come from? It was a desert, right?
Yeah.
And how do you green it? How do you feed people in a place like this? I'm going to come to the enemies in just a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Mark Twain famously came here and said it's a desert and, there's nothing here. But, so we mentioned the army, mentioned the culture. There's the government itself that promotes and encourages entrepreneurship. There's the Innovation Authority that gives out grants to deep tech technology companies. No equity. There's that element. There's no question that the Israeli chutzpah, which is part of the cultural element for sure. There's definitely a historical element here. I think that, not to get too heavy.
We walk this way. Tell me the most interesting places to go here. Now let's come to some of the downsides. Okay, we know all the good stuff that has happened. when you look at things like the politics of it right now, the judicial reforms coming, there's a talk about Israel moving towards the right. We're not going to have that much diversity. Democracy is in danger. Those are the sort of things that then stop fostering innovation in the same manner. At least that's what the risk is. That's what the...
I mean, I said to you, my opinion on this stuff is extremely unpopular, but I think there are challenges. Let me just give that disclaimer. There are challenges, the judicial reform, the conflict, it's challenging. Having said that, the Jewish people have been through rougher times, and neither the judicial reform nor the conflict will be the end of Israeli tech, nor will it be the end of democracy. We're not going anywhere. Again, I'm not saying there aren't people who are pulling their money. There are. That's a fact. But
New York Times said that there are a large number of people saying that if this is the path on which Israel is going, then we don't necessarily want to have our money out here. And one of the risks is any society and any the hubs that are being built out here, which are being built on very talented individuals, that talent is fungible. They can go to New York and set up their companies.
I mean, listen, I'm very, very involved, formally and informally, in everything that's going on in this country. My brother is an administrative assistant for one of the leading, MKs in this country. So, I do see what's going on, both from the inside and from the tech world. I see both sides. And again, it's challenging, but at the end of the day, a tech investor wants to invest in creativity, wants to invest in innovation, wants to invest in potential, in dreams. And those dreams are not going anywhere. Okay, so, it's true that right now people are scared, but I can tell you right now, we can have this conversation in 1 year from now, and you'll see that not only did this not affect Israeli tech is stronger than it's ever been. I have no doubt about that, because the innovation's increasing, the creativity's increasing, the success stories are increasing. We have, a company that's raising yesterday $300 million, that is the leading cybersecurity company in the world. So we're seeing more and more of this. I'm not really worried, if I'm being honest with you.
So I was told that if you come to Bika Cafe, you get everybody in the tech world globally, get them to talk to them right out here. You're one of the people who was actually involved with the IPO of Facebook itself, right? Weren't you?
I was, a very long time ago, yeah.
So tell me about the scene. Tell me about what makes places like this the incubation of so much technology, and what makes Israel the tech hub that it is.
Absolutely. So the whole country of Israel is an amazing place filled with, frankly, leaders. The culture here is to be a leader. From a young age, people go to the army. They're taught to be leaders. And I think that encourages an entrepreneurial culture. Historically, the tech hubs in Israel were in a few places, but I think over the last 10 years, it's very much concentrated in Tel Aviv, and even in a shorter period than that, in Sarona, in this specific area. And I think part of it's the convenience to the train and to the highway, and it's a beautiful place. They're adding construction, it's got a cool vibe, obviously, and so this particular place attracts a lot of people.
So you said that there's a culture of leadership, right? And that happens because you're going to the army. If you're going to the army, you've got to take decisions. If you're a 19-year-old, you're manning an Iron Dome unit, and you've got to take a decision, do I shoot that missile down or not? That makes going and setting up a company not that challenging after that.
It's still challenging, but I think it's good preparation. I think even more so than the decisions is probably just the focus on working with people. I think that university education, it doesn't generally force you to work as a team and to be a leader. I had I think a little bit more of a unique experience. My program was much more collaborative, and we were constantly working in teams, which I think helps foster that. But it's the interpersonal side that I actually think that makes the bigger difference. Technology obviously is the underpinning, but being able to work on technology in the context of other people, I think, is the major driver.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this episode of This World. We're not going to be in Israel next week, but I do promise every once in a while, This World will travel to different corners of the world. We will tell you about other countries, about other cultures, about the politics of it, to help you understand this world and to help you understand it, as always, from an Indian perspective. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now.